communication between the family at times was a good thing. I began to walk again, shaking my head and faking a yawn, but Richard matched my pace easily now, and began to speak once more. "You haven't spoken about when you were kidnapped since it's happened, or about the time when you managed to save Ryan and Weezer. Both of these experiences must have been frightening." "Yeah," I nodded, "which is why I don't want to talk about those experiences." "And you found Mum when she tried to kill herself." "I told you I don't want to talk about it." This time Richard didn't respond, and I made a run for it. I knew Richard wouldn't be able to keep up. I ended up boarding the bus alone, knowing I'd be eating alone in McDonald's too. I didn't understand why Richard wanted me to talk about the bad experiences I had had in my life. I sat quickly next to a guy reading a book, and folded my arms, not knowing whether I should feel upset, angry or nothing. Luckily the journey into town wasn't long, 15 minutes max, something I was grateful for, as not having anything to do just made me think about what Richard had said. He'd brought the experiences I'd had shooting back, something which I could do without. I looked over at the guy reading the book, wondering what sorts of issues he'd ever had to deal with. Had he ever had any bad experiences? I wished I could be reborn. I wished I could live my life all over again. I wished I could go back in time. I wished I could change time. But as I began to stare at the ceiling, rolling my eyes, feeling a slight pang of hatred toward Richard, but only for a moment, the bus began to slow, and I heard movement. I looked around and saw out of the corner of my eye the guy lower his book, looking across me to the people beginning to descend, all of them seeming to be in a rush to leave. But when there was a gap in the flow, the guy tapped me lightly on the back of the neck, making me shudder momentarily. "You moving, dude?" "Yeah," I nodded. "Yeah, sure." I stood, my legs shaking for a few seconds before I turned toward the doors, which were open. "Thank you," I told the driver as I made a step off. He acknowledged this, if only for a moment, and I stepped onto the pavement, almost unbalancing myself, as I had judged the height of the step wrongly. The guy, who had been reading the book, was now staring at me. I didn't ask him what he was looking at. I believed I would have done with the gang present, but alone, a fight was out of the question. We both knew who would win, and although I was fast on my feet, I didn't like to waste energy needlessly. So I began to move toward my destination, a crowd following close behind. None of these individuals were from the bus. They'd already dispersed their separate ways, and I doubted McDonald's would really appeal to a flock, over half of which consisted of old age pensioners. It was also quite busy in town, especially for a Monday, but I soon began to realise that, of course, other schools were also on half-term. Many teens were hurrying past, the boys with HMV or game bags, many of the girls with makeup or moisturiser products, although I did see one with a Carphone warehouse bag, which smashed me in the shin as she hurried past. "Oi, watch it!" I screamed, also mouthing a few expletives. She stopped, gave me the V sign briefly, before stalking away, looking angry. So I now began to hobble, but the pain, thankfully, began to subside rather quickly. I took the next left, and McDonald's came into sight immediately. As I got closer still, I began to smell the food they made, and my mouth immediately began to water. I walked in, looking around at all the deserted tables, taking in the quietness of the place. We were being 5 to 4, people had already had dinner, and it was a little too early yet for tea. I gave my order and told the girl I wanted to eat in, before waiting for her to create the food. I took in the smell of fries mingled in with other, less obvious smells, my belly rumbling in protest. Not even 5 minutes after they'd turned away, I had the food in front of me. The burger boxed, the fries exposed, the whiteness of the salt glistening upon the crispy yellow surface, the McFlurry encased in its plastic pot, the ice cream already beginning to melt as I opened my burger at the nearest table before taking a big bite. The salad was the first thing I tasted, which was hardly surprising as it was covering the inside of the bun so thickly that the burger couldn't be seen at all. A lot of it was ending up in the box itself and it leaked from the sides, but I hardly noticed as I was so hungry. It was unimaginable. I began to think about the kids who were my age and younger, starving to death in countries I had never even seen apart from commercials and would more than likely never see. I had no idea how they could cope, but the worst people to see were anorexics. They thought they seemed attractive, but they just looked alien. Surely their insides were screaming at them to give some food. Just a little bit of food. Oi! The voice ripped through the air like a whiplash, making me choke on the fries I was halfway through, even though I hadn't actually noticed until that moment. My empty cheeseburger box was lying on the tray I had been given, but I looked around the fry halfway toward my mouth as I stared toward the guy who had evidently spoken. He was standing in the doorway, staring over at me. I didn't recognise him, and that made me feel a little frightened. What did he want? I had considered making a run for it, but only for a split second. I still had food to finish, and he was already making his way through the array of tables, keeping his eyes fixed upon mine at all times. It was only as he reached my table that I broke the eye contact and stared down at my fries, now eating slowly, trying to distract myself from having to look at him. "You deaf?" the guy asked gruffly. "No," I muttered, barely opening my lips. "Mind if I join you?" A chair scraped upon the tiled floor, indicating he'd already answered his own question. "Good. Look, mate, what do you want?" I asked, sighing and stuffing 4 fries into my mouth at once. You Ryan's brother?" "Ryan who?" "Frakes. Who wants to know?" I take it that's a yes. I didn't respond. This hadn't been a question, it's been a statement. "Well, I just thought I'd best let you know. I saw him in the BG about half an hour ago. You know it?" I nodded. The BG was a pub in town, the cheapest pub in town. I had no idea how much their alcohol was, but their coke was 80p a glass. He looked pissed. We were with a girl and a guy. That was when my throat went dry. A girl and a guy? What if the girl was... I jumped up, my chair falling over with a clatter, but I took no notice. "I thought that would make you move," he grinned. "Take me to him," I shouted, now feeling desperate. I'm gonna kill him." "Well, if you're gonna use violence, maybe it would be best for me to just take me." "Well, alright, man. I'm just a messenger, you know what I mean?" I grabbed him by the shirt, annoyed with his talking, which was evidently wasting precious time. "There's only so many times I can ask nicely. Either you take me to him or I'll kill you." That was when the talking ceased and he finally nodded, which was when I released him. We began to make our way outside, him power walking, me jogging, wishing he'd moved faster. We turned right before heading straight on as if going back toward the bus, but instead of continuing straight on until the station came into sight, we turned left past some more shops, all advertising crap in the windows, our eyes fixed on the place right at the very end, the BG. I stared at the guy, swallowing hard, and he nodded, evidently saying, without words, that I should go first. I also nodded, taking several deep breaths to try and calm myself, trying to clear my mind of the images I had of Ryan, pissed. I then placed my hand upon the handle of the door before pulling it down and pushing it open.